Okay, so what we're looking at here is we're going to look at different units of length. And what our different units of length do is they help us to describe how long something is in a useful way. Okay, so in a way that's actually meaningful and helpful to us. So why do we bother, right? What's the point? Why do we have different units in the first place? Well, if we want to measure something in the classroom, then the chances are we're just going to grab a ruler and we're going to see how long it is, right? Tend to measure those things in centimeters, maybe millimeters, depending on which size we use. But it's not always sensible to measure things in centimeters. Okay, and in the last video we talked about different things we can use to measure things. But if we wanted to measure around the hockey pitch, around the rugby pitch, we probably wouldn't use our ruler, right? We would use our trundle rule. We'd measure it in meters rather than centimeters. Okay, another example there, would it be sensible to describe the distance between two cities as something in centimeters, right? No. Okay, we tend to use kilometers, we might use miles, okay, but we wouldn't use centimeters, right? Because for a start, what's that? 7,500,000 centimeters. That's about, we don't understand how far that is, right? We can't really get a grasp on that, mainly since the rulers that we've got in our drawers at school are 30 centimeters, right? And now we're talking of a distance of 7.5 million. Okay, so it becomes too difficult to comprehend. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to convert it between different scales to make it more appropriate, make it more tangible. So when we are looking at our different units, there are a whole load of different units that we can think about. Now we're going to look at the table below. We're going to use meters, centimeters, millimeters, and kilometers. Now there are other ones. I'll put them on the table anyway, but I've scored them out just because we don't use them, right? They're not very common in day-to-day life, and I've only ever seen them come up maybe once or twice. Okay, so I'll put them there for kind of completeness sake, but you will find that most of your life you'll never deal with them. Okay, so we're looking at our meter is the one in the middle. We denote that with an M. When we want to get smaller than that, we move columns to the right, and when we want to get bigger than that, we move columns to the left. So kilometer is the one that's bigger than that, and we denote that with a km. And then scored out in between, we've got hectometer and decameter. We don't need them. We don't care about them, so we've crossed them out. Moving smaller than a meter, we've got a decimeter. Again, we don't really use that. And we've got centimeters and millimeters, cm and mm. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to think about how we can shift them using the table. I'm going to treat it in the same way that we would do when we're thinking about our place value. So thinking back to when we did our ones and our tens, our hundreds, our thousands, and our tenths, hundredths columns. Right, we're going to try and have a similar idea to this. So the question then is, how many meters are there in 1 kilometer? So what we're going to do is we want to go from meter into kilometer. Okay, and there's my little arrow just to try and show me that. And so all I'm going to do is I am going to start my meters box, and I'm going to write down a 0, and I'm going to fill each column there with a 0 until I get to my kilometer column. Okay, so how many meters are there in a kilometer? There are 1,000. Okay, that's the number I've got from my table. All I'm doing is just shifting from one column into another. So thinking about another one, how many centimeters are there in a meter? So I want to go from centimeter to meter. So there's my arrow, just to show me that. So I'm starting at centimeter, and I'm zeroing my columns until I get to my last one, which was my meter. So there are 100 centimeters in a meter. Okay, now we should be familiar with some of these already, right? We think back to our meter stick. We should have seen them before, so this shouldn't be new to us. Okay, how many meters are there in 1 kilometer? So I want to know how many meters there are in a kilometer. So I'm starting with a kilometer and I'm going to the meters. And so this time my arrow goes the different way. It goes from left to right. Okay, and because I'm going smaller columns, rather than just writing zeros, I've got to start with a 0 point. Okay, and this 0 point shows me that I'm going the smaller way. So I've got 0 point, then after that it's the same idea. So zeros in my columns until I get to where I want to be. So 0, 0, 1. So how many meters are there in 1 kilometer? 0.001. Okay, that's one way we could do it. Or we could think about just converting them from one thing to another and take it in steps. So here in little boxes, we've got kilometers, we've got meters, centimeters, and millimeters. And so things that we know is we know that there's 1 centimeter from 10 millimeters. We know that 100 centimeters makes 1 meter. And we know that 1,000 meters makes 1 kilometer. So thinking about some things that we might want to do then. If we want to go from centimeters into millimeters, how would we change that? Well, we just multiply it by 10. Okay, for every 1 centimeter we've got, we have 10 millimeters. Okay, so when we change it that way, we're going to have 10 times as many. If I want to go from 1 meter into centimeters, I've got 100 of them, so I need to multiply it by 100. And if I want to go from 1 kilometer into meters, I should have 1,000 meters, so I'm going to multiply by 1,000. Okay, so the arrows here just show me what I do when I want to go from one box to the next. If I want to go the other way, if I want to go from meters to kilometers, I'm going to do the opposite. The opposite of multiplying by 1,000 is dividing by 1,000. If I want to go from centimeters to meters, I divide by 100. And if I want to go from millimeters to centimeters, I divide it by 10. Okay, so if you want to use the table, or if you want to use this just kind of conversion method, it doesn't really matter which one you want to use, I don't really mind, but you're going to need to use one of them. Okay, ultimately you're going to be expected to change between these units. Okay, so you're going to have a way of doing that. Okay, so if you want, you might want to pause the video just now and get a copy of that written down in your jar or on a bit of paper somewhere to help you with some of the questions that we're going to look at later. Okay, so convert the following. We are going to look at changing 2 meters into centimeters, 5 kilometers into meters, 1 kilometer into centimeters, 3,000 meters into kilometers, and 400 centimeters into meters. And what we've done is we've copied and pasted our little conversion chart to try and help us with these questions. So, question 1, I want to go from meters into centimeters. Okay, so I'm looking at my chart, I want to go from meters to centimeters, I take what I've got and I multiply it by 1,000. So how many meters do I have? I've got 2 of them, so I'm going to do 2 times 100, because we're multiplying by 100, not 1,000, don't know why I just said that. And so we end up getting 200 centimeters. Okay, when you've got your final answer, you have to remember and put your units down. Okay, next one, we're going to go from kilometers into meters, and so this is where we're going to multiply by 1,000. Far too keen. How many kilometers do we have? Well, we've got 5 of them in the question, so we're going to do 5 times 1,000, which is 5,000. And so we end up there getting 5,000 meters. For number 3, when we want to change kilometers into centimeters, we are going to multiply by 100,000. And so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go from kilometers into meters, so we're going to times it by 1,000. And then we're going to go from meters into centimeters, and then we're going to times it by 100. Okay, so we're going to do 2 things at once. Or we can use the table and we can fill it out that way. Okay, so when we do 1 times 100,000, we get 100,000 centimeters. Okay, so you might want to check that one. You might want to make sure that when you do 1 times 1,000 and then times it by 100, you get the same answer. Number 4, we want to go from 3,000 meters into kilometers. So I'm going from meters to kilometers here, so I'm going backwards. So I need to divide. And so I've got 3,000 meters. I'm dividing that by 1,000. I get 3 kilometers. And similarly in the last one, I want to go from 400 centimeters into meters. So from centimeters into meters, we divide it by 100. I've got 400 of them, so I need to do 400 divided by 100. And that gets me 4 meters out as my answer at the end.